All right, so we are starting today on the creation of our new nation. We're going to start by finishing up something on the Revolution, and then we'll move on next class to the actual impact on the U.S. Constitution. Now, when we talk about minorities, right, the two minorities that we really want to focus is going to be on African Americans and on women. So we're going to start with the African Americans. So one thing that I would write on your piece of paper is I would do a connecting line from slaves the north to slaves the south. So do a connecting line from slaves the north and slaves the south. I would make sure you know the difference, and then I'm going to have you write down a word, and I'm going to spell it for you. So ready to write this word down? It is going to be the word section, S-E-C-T-I-O-N, alism, A-L-I-S-M. So what sectionalism means is it's basically separating things into sections. And in this case, this is the separation between the North and the South over slavery. What other major historical event is going to really display this sectionalism? Civil War. So this is kind of the beginning of that Civil War kind of aspect of the North and the South. Now, in terms of slaves in the North, what you need to know for slaves in the North, that it was much better for slaves in the North. And above slaves, make sure you know that those are probably going to be former slaves. So much better for former slaves in the North. Let me explain why. Most of these people are going to be people who are going to come from the army. So these are workers, right? These are going to be those workers that are going to know how to be able to fight. But now they've been released because of duty to their country, duty to England, or they were just freed upon the end of the war. The women are going to become a lot of maids and a lot of house workers, and it's all paid. There's no real slave labor up in the North a ton. The men are going to become whalers and fishermen. If you've read the book Moby Dick, you know, for example, the fact that one of the major characters is a very successful African American who is going to be able to attempt to be able to capture the great Moby Dick. Now, with all of this going along, is that this is going to really show the impact of the North. You have a ton more freedom in the North. You're able to get more job opportunities, less discrimination. Does that mean there was no discrimination? Not at all. But it was a lot better. If you look at this photo, there's something big that you're going to notice about this. What are you seeing is different about what you'd expect in this photo? You guys, so there's black people, yes, but then who's with those black people? White people, right? Do you guys see how there's not segregation in the churches? So there's less segregation. I would maybe put that down as well. Less segregation in the North. Now, there was some segregation, especially with discrimination, but definitely not as much as the South. In the South, completely different. Major reason why is because these are going to be especially where the people from the armies are going to go, and now your slaves are going to be able to revolt. They are now going to be able to kill you with all the massive amounts of guns that they have and the massive amounts of fighting power, right? Reality is that the vast majority of these slaves worked in positions like the drummer or the cook. A lot of them did not know how to fight. And yet what this results in, and really what you need to know, is this is going to result in violence against slaves. This is going to be you rule out of fear. Now, with this violence, the idea is if I whip you enough, if I hit you enough and hurt you enough, you will not hurt me back. It's definitely leading out of fear. Now, a lot of these slaves, make sure again that you know that the South was much worse for slaves. So make sure again you know much worse for these slaves, and these are definitely still going to be slaves. Now, one thing that happens is when England and Spain are going to end up banning the international slave trade for themselves, what this means is that you no longer have the easy ability to get slaves from Africa. This results in slaves making babies, whether it's going to be from that plantation owner or from slaves with slaves. Now, if you have, just like a cow, If your cow has a baby, do you have to pay for that cow?
Yeah.
Who do you pay? Yourself? Right? You own the cow. Same thing with the slaves. If the slave has a baby, who owns that slave now? You. You don't have to pay anything for it. So they're going to really encourage you to be able to have a ton of babies with these slaves. Now this brings us to women, which are very, very important. Could somebody remind me of the time?
It's 12:36.
36. Great. Let's do women next class, okay? So I know this is really short. Wait. Don't put all your stuff away, though. I have to explain the assignment. Okay? So if you will look at your half sheet real quick, I'm going to explain that assignment to you. Now, on this assignment, you are in charge of a couple of things. So first off, you're going to have what is known as a Federalist and an Anti-Federalist. A Federalist supported the passing of the Constitution. An Anti-Federalist did not. You will need to first research into what their thoughts were. So for example, if the Anti-Federalists are saying, hey, and be quiet so I can explain the assignment. If the Anti-Federalists are going to say, we don't want a king, you could use that as part of your thing. What you're going to create is little bumper stickers, because if you've ever seen all these people drive around with bumper stickers, pro-Trump, pro-Clinton, whatever it could be, you're going to create that for yourselves, but with buggies, right? Because buggies, cars, bumper. Anyways, so one thing really quickly I need to explain that's different than on your paper. Your paper might say the paper provided. I didn't provide you any paper. If you need the paper, you can ask me. But it's a full sheet, colored on one side for the Federalists, on the other side, full sheet for the Federalists as well. Yes, or Anti-Federalists.
Can we create this on like Adobe Illustrator?
Yeah, I've had people ask if they can use computers. That is fine, but there is a difference between putting a bunch of effort into creating this and sticking a clip art on there of a crown and saying "Kings suck" in like Times New Roman 12-point font and printing it out. Do you understand? Put effort in, okay? Do next class.